Why are the CEO's deaf twin daughters sitting there like leftovers at their own party? A woman snapped. Her friend scoffed. If they can't talk, they shouldn't be out here. The single dad in a black staff uniform heard it as he passed, and he saw the twins stiffen under the lights. By the way, where are you watching from? Tell me in the comments below. A mansion full of powerful people kept smiling for photos, while two little girls sat alone like an afterthought. He didn't argue or beg anyone to be kind. He just set the tray down, knelt, and let his hands speak first. When the girls' faces softened, nearby laughter thinned into uneasy silence. This wasn't about a party, it was about who gets dignity when no one's watching. He was supposed to stay in the service lanes, where hedges and marble columns hid staff from the real guests. The badge on his chest read Ethan Rowe, Catering Logistics, and most people read that as, "Don't look too closely." He accepted it because the rent was due and his son needed stability more than speeches. He'd once worn a different badge, one that opened secured doors. Back then, he'd been an intelligence analyst, trained to read a room and translate panic into decisions. He'd left that life when it stopped fitting a home with one small boy in it. Now he worked events, clocked out, and made it to bedtime. Tonight, the Halden estate glittered with curated lighting and quiet wealth. Donors drifted in designer shoes. Investors hovered near the stage where Vivienne Halden would speak later, her smile already working the crowd. Staff moved along the perimeter, fixing problems before anyone noticed. His phone buzzed. A message from the sitter about Caleb's school fee due in the morning. A pinch tightened behind his ribs. He typed, "I'll handle it," then locked the screen and kept moving. Music pulsed over the lawn. He carried a tray past the main circle and saw the twins again, Lila and Nora, at a small table near a fountain, close enough to be seen but far enough to be included. Their dresses were perfect. Their posture was not. They sat with shoulders curled inward, watching everyone else belong. A couple approached with a bright smile, said something cheerful, then froze when the girls answered with quick signs to each other. The couple retreated, embarrassed, as if the children had done something wrong. Another guest tried, failed, and laughed it off. Each time, the twins' faces tightened a little more, learning the shape of rejection. A co-worker brushed past and murmured, "Don't get involved. That's the CEO's family. You'll get blamed." He kept walking, but the words wouldn't settle. People got nervous around what they didn't understand, then called that nervousness inconvenience. He watched Nora glance across the lawn toward her mother, searching for recognition that never came. Vivienne stood in the spotlight of her own event, surrounded by advisors and cameras. She looked unstoppable, like a woman who believed every problem had a lever: money, influence, authority, if you pulled hard enough. But the twins weren't a lever, they were kids. He reached the refresh station, set down his tray, and told himself to stay in his lane. Then he pictured Caleb at home, half asleep, pretending he wasn't because he wanted a hug. He pictured his son learning from him whether a man walks past small cruelties or stops. So he turned back. Stepping into guest space felt like crossing an electric line. A server's eyes widened. A security guard shifted his weight. He didn't rush. He approached slowly, keeping his shoulders soft, his hands visible. He lowered himself to their level and signed, simple and clear, "Hi. You don't have to sit alone." Lila stared, shock cracking her guarded mask. Nora leaned forward, then answered with hesitant hands that grew faster as relief warmed her face. Their shoulders dropped. Their eyes brightened. Joy slipped in like sunlight. He signed back without showing off, matching their pace, letting them lead. Around the table, the party noise dulled, as if the world had leaned closer. A conversation nearby stopped mid-sentence. Someone lifted a phone, then lowered it again, suddenly unsure. He felt the old training click in, focus on the vulnerable, ignore the noise, control the temperature of the moment. The girls signed faster now, telling him they hated being stared at, that adults spoke at them like they were broken. His throat tightened, but his face stayed steady. He signed, "I see you. I understand. That's enough for tonight." Behind him, heels paused on the grass, and a sharp inhale signaled someone important arriving with cameras already turning. The sharp inhale behind him belonged to Vivian Halden. She didn't raise her voice at first, which was how she always signaled real authority. The music kept playing, the fountain kept whispering, and the cameras drifted closer as if drawn by instinct. She took in the scene in one glance. A staff member kneeling, her daughters engaged, guests watching instead of mingling. Her jaw tightened, not with concern, but calculation. He felt her presence before he saw her shadow stretch across the table. The twins noticed, too. Nora's hand slowed, her eyes flicking past him toward her mother, then back again, uncertain. He adjusted immediately, softening his posture, signing that everything was okay, that they were safe right here. Vivienne cleared her throat. "Excuse me," she said, clipped and polite, the way one addresses an inconvenience. "Your staff, you should be working." A few guests shifted uncomfortably. Someone laughed, then stopped when no one joined in. He didn't jump up, he didn't argue. He simply finished the sentence he was signing, then looked up, calm as still water. "I am," he said evenly. "I'm helping." That was the wrong answer. Her eyes hardened, and the thin smile she used for donors vanished. "My daughters don't need help from catering," she replied, just loud enough for the nearest circle to hear. "They need space. Please return to your assigned area." The word "assigned" landed like a stamp. He felt the familiar pressure of hierarchy pressing down, the reminder of where he was supposed to stand. Around them, whispers bloomed. Some guests nodded along, relieved someone important had restored order. Others frowned, watching the girls shrink back into themselves. He glanced at the twins. Lila's hands hovered midair, unsure if she was allowed to finish what she was saying. That hesitation cut deeper than the reprimand. He signed one last thing to them. "It's okay. I'm still here," then slowly rose to his feet. As he stepped back, a security guard moved closer, not touching him but making the boundary clear. He gave a small nod, signaling compliance. This wasn't the hill, not yet. He retreated to the edge of the lawn, the invisible line where staff belonged. The party resumed its hum, but it sounded thinner now, like music played through a wall. Vivienne turned back to her circle, already reframing the moment with practiced ease, laughing it off as a misunderstanding. The twins remained at the table. No one sat with them. A coworker sidled up, voice low. "You okay?" she asked, eyes darting toward the CEO. That was bold. He shrugged lightly. They needed someone. She studied him for a second longer than necessary. "You ever do more than events?" she asked, almost casually. He met her gaze, then looked away. "A long time ago." She nodded, filing it away. "Well," she said, "you've got people watching now. Be careful." As if on cue, his phone vibrated again. Another message from the sitter. Apologetic this time, explaining the school deadline couldn't be pushed. He closed his eyes briefly, grounding himself in the feel of grass under his shoes, the cool night air. He'd figure it out. He always did. Across the lawn, the twins sat frozen, their earlier smiles fading as adults once again flowed around them like water around stones. A man at the bar leaned toward his companion and murmured, Did you see that? Guy signed like a pro. The companion raised an eyebrow. Yeah, weird, right? Weird. He almost smiled. A stage manager waved him over sharply, annoyed. You're late resetting the West tables, she snapped. We're about to transition. He nodded and got to work, stacking chairs, aligning linens. His hands moved efficiently, muscle memory from years of logistics under pressure. While he worked, he listened. He always listened. Snippets drifted past, confusion, curiosity, a few sharp judgments about Vivian's handling of things. Someone said, "You'd think, with all her resources." Another replied, "Money doesn't teach empathy." As he passed the fountain again, he caught Lila's eye. She lifted her hand slightly, a small, hopeful motion. He answered with a subtle sign from his side, barely noticeable to anyone else. Her shoulders relaxed just a bit. At the edge of the lawn, Vivian was already resetting the narrative, laughing with an investor, gesturing broadly as if nothing unusual had happened. But her gaze flicked once toward the service corridor, sharp and assessing, as if measuring a variable she hadn't planned for. This was no longer just about a rule broken. It was about control slipping, just enough to be felt. And before things escalated any further, before the night decided what it would become, let me pause here. If stories about quiet dignity and public power shifts pull you in, make sure you're subscribed, because what happens next turns this party inside out. He lined up the last table, straightened, and felt it settle in his bones. This night wasn't finished with him yet. He lined up the last table and stepped back, checking symmetry the way he always did. Order calmed rooms. It calmed people too if you knew how to apply it. Tonight, order felt brittle, like glass stretched too thin. The party flowed again, but not the same way. Conversations carried an edge now. Laughter came half a beat late. Eyes kept drifting toward the small table by the fountain where the twins sat, untouched plates in front of them. No one quite knew what to do next, and that uncertainty leaked into everything. He moved between zones, refilling water pitchers, collecting empty glasses, doing the invisible work that kept the illusion intact. As he passed groups of guests, fragments followed him like loose threads. Sign language, I think. Why didn't anyone else try? Awkward situation for the CEO, honestly. A man in a tailored jacket leaned toward another and murmured, "You see how the girls lit up? That wasn't basic signing, that was fluent." His companion frowned. "You don't learn that from YouTube." He kept his head down, but his ears stayed open. They always did. Near the bar, a junior executive laughed too loudly and said, "If my kids acted like that at an event, I'd hire someone to deal with it." The laugh that followed was thin, forced. No one met his eyes. Vivienne, meanwhile, worked the room with surgical precision. She moved from cluster to cluster, correcting tone, redirecting attention, smoothing feathers. Every so often, she glanced toward the fountain, irritation flickering before being buried under polish. Her daughters remained where they were, obediently still, as if making themselves smaller might make things easier. He felt it like a low-grade alarm. The situation hadn't resolved, it had just been paused. At the service corridor, he paused to sip water. His hands trembled slightly, adrenaline finally catching up. He flexed his fingers, grounding himself. Years ago, that shake would have meant incoming chaos. Now, it meant he cared, and that was harder. A vendor approached, lowering her voice. "That was impressive," she said, "with the girls." He shrugged. They just needed someone to talk to. "Still," she pressed, "you didn't hesitate. Reminded me of someone I knew overseas." She studied his face, searching for confirmation. He gave none. She smiled faintly. Whatever you used to do, it shows. Across the lawn, the stage lights brightened. A subtle cue rippled through the crowd. It was almost time for the CEO's address. Staff hurried, adjusting microphones, ushering guests closer. The twins were gently guided to a spot near the front, close enough to be visible but far enough to stay silent. They looked overwhelmed. He saw it instantly, the way Nora's breathing quickened, or the way Lila's hands clenched in her lap. Big crowds, bright lights, all eyes forward, a recipe for panic if you didn't know how to prepare them. He took a step forward, then stopped. Security stood closer now, alert. He wasn't invited back into that circle, not officially. Vivian stepped onto the stage to applause. She smiled, waited for quiet, then began speaking about innovation, inclusion, and the future. The words were perfect, the timing impeccable. The irony was almost painful. As she spoke, Nora pressed her palms over her ears, even though sound wasn't the problem. Lila leaned toward her sister, signing quickly, fear creeping into her movements. No one on stage noticed. Most of the crowd didn't either. He did. He shifted position, angling himself where the twins could see him without drawing attention. Slowly, deliberately, he signed from a distance. "Breathe with me." Slow. "You're okay." Lila caught it first. Her eyes locked onto his hands. She mirrored the motion, drawing Nora along, their shoulders lowered by degrees. A woman nearby noticed and nudged her partner. "Look," she whispered. "He's calming them down from over there." The partner squinted. "That's the same guy from earlier, right?" "Yeah," she said. "The staff dad." That label spread faster than his name ever would have. On stage, Vivian reached the section of her speech about family values. The crowd murmured approval. A few people glanced pointedly toward the twins. The contrast was impossible to miss now, even for those trying not to see it. He felt the shift. It was subtle, but real. The room's allegiance was loosening, curiosity edging out deference. When the applause swelled at the end of the speech, it was loud but uneven. Vivian's smile held, but her eyes scanned the crowd, assessing damage, recalibrating. They landed on him, standing at the edge, hands lowered now, attention fixed on her daughters. For the first time that night, her confidence wavered. She stepped down from the stage and moved quickly, heels cutting through grass with purpose. Advisors trailed behind her, whispering. Security straightened. He didn't move. Running would look like guilt. Staying looked like intention. The twins watched their mother approach, tension winding back into their bodies. He raised one hand, just enough for them to see, and signed, "I'm still here." Vivienne stopped a few feet away, close enough that cameras could catch them both if someone lifted a phone. Her voice was low, controlled, but the edge was sharper now. "We need to talk," she said. Around them, the party held its breath. "We need to talk," Vivian said, and for the first time that night it wasn't a request wrapped in courtesy. It was a directive. He didn't answer immediately. He lowered his hand so the twins wouldn't feel pulled between them, then gave a small nod. Not submission, acknowledgement. The difference mattered. She gestured toward a side path off the main lawn, a route lined with trimmed hedges that led toward the mansion's glass-lined corridor. Advisors hovered, waiting for her signal. Security shifted again, closing the invisible perimeter. He followed without rushing. Panic always fed on speed. As they walked, applause from the speech faded behind them, replaced by the muted sounds of fountains and distant music. The corridor swallowed noise, yet amplifying footsteps. This was where decisions were made quietly, away from witnesses, exactly where she was strongest. She stopped near a wall of windows overlooking the party. Her reflection hovered beside her like a second self, perfectly composed. "You put me in a difficult position," she said, arms crossed. "My staff exists to support the event, not interfere with my family." He met her eyes steady. "Your daughters were alone." "They were fine," she replied quickly, too quickly. "They always are." A pause stretched. He could hear the faint hum of climate control, the distant clink of glassware being cleared. The building itself felt like it was listening. "They didn't look fine," he said. Her jaw tightened. "You don't get to decide that." "I didn't decide," he answered. "They did." For a moment, something flickered. Annoyance tangled with something closer to fear, fear of being seen wrong, fear of losing control of the narrative. "You embarrassed me," she said, voice low, "in front of people who matter." He nodded once. "I understand." That surprised her. She'd expected defensiveness, maybe pleading. Understanding wasn't part of the script. "Then you'll understand why this can't happen again," she continued. "You crossed a boundary. I could have you removed." "You could," he agreed. Silence again. She studied him more closely now, as if trying to reconcile the uniform with the calm. Most people folded under her stare. He didn't. "What's your name?" she asked abruptly. He hesitated just long enough to register the shift. "Ethan," he said. "Last name?" "Rowe." She repeated it softly, testing the sound, then shook her head. "I don't recall approving you for guest interaction." "I wasn't interacting with guests," he said. "I was communicating with kids." Her eyes narrowed. "You're very confident for someone in your position." He almost smiled. Almost. Behind the glass, the party continued. Guests laughed again, but it felt forced, like everyone was waiting for the next crack. Phones hovered lower now, not recording, but ready. From the lawn, a sudden, sharp sound cut through the air. Nora's chair scraping back. Too loud, too abrupt. He turned instinctively. Through the window, he saw it. The twins standing now, pressed together, eyes wide. A security guard crouched in front of them, speaking slowly, gesturing with open hands like you would to a startled animal. His mouth moved, but they couldn't hear him. The crowd's attention snapped back in an instant. Vivienne followed his gaze. Her breath hitched, just once. "What's happening?" she asked, already moving. "They're overwhelmed," he said. "They need space, and someone who speaks their language." She didn't respond. She pushed through the corridor doors and onto the lawn, heels sinking slightly into grass she'd never had to walk across herself. Advisors tried to flank her. She waved them off. The security guard looked up, relieved to see authority. He started explaining, gesturing toward the twins, the crowd, the sudden disruption. Vivienne raised her hand. "It's fine," she said loudly, for everyone to hear. "They're just nervous." The word landed wrong. Nora's hands moved fast now, sharp with fear. Lila's face flushed, breath shallow. People stared. Someone lifted a phone. Another whispered, "Should we give them space?" Vivienne glanced back at him, frustration breaking through composure. "Do something," she hissed. "You caused this." He didn't argue. He stepped forward, careful not to startle them. Security hesitated, then stepped aside without being told. That, too, was noticed. He signed calmly, clearly, hands steady. "Look at me. Breathe. It's okay to stop." The twins locked onto him immediately. Nora mirrored his breathing. Lila nodded, tears pooling, but not falling. The crowd watched, silent now. Vivienne stood frozen, caught between relief and humiliation. Her daughters responded instantly to someone she'd just dismissed, while her authority hovered uselessly beside them. Whispers surged again, louder this time, not mocking, curious, uncomfortable. A woman near the front murmured, "Why doesn't their mother know how to do that?" A man replied, "With all her resources?" Vivian heard it, every syllable. He felt the moment tipping, balance shifting underfoot. This was no longer private. The lawn had become a stage, and she hadn't chosen the script. He finished the sequence, slowing the twins' breathing until their shoulders dropped, their panic easing. He stayed where he was, not claiming space, simply holding it. Vivian straightened, mask snapping back into place. She smiled too brightly and addressed the crowd. "Thank you for your patience," she said. "Everything is under control." But the lie hung in the air, because everyone had just seen the truth. And it wasn't hers anymore. The silence after Vivian's announcement was heavier than the music restarting. It pressed against skin, against breath, against every carefully maintained illusion on the lawn. People didn't immediately go back to talking. They watched. They waited. Control, once cracked, didn't reseal easily. He stayed where he was, still crouched enough that the twins could see his hands clearly. He signed reassurance in smaller motions now, slower, letting their nervous systems catch up. Lila nodded, wiping at her eyes with the heel of her palm. Nora's breathing steadied, her shoulders finally unclenching. Vivienne stood just behind them, smiling too wide, hands clasped in front of her like she was posing for a photo. Cameras hovered uncertainly. Some guests lowered their phones. Others kept them up, no longer sure who the moment belonged to. An advisor leaned in and whispered something urgent. Vivienne waved her away without looking. Her gaze was fixed on him now, sharp with calculation. The humiliation hadn't been loud, but it had been absolute. Wealth and authority had failed in front of witnesses, and she knew it. "Thank you," she said through her smile, voice carrying just enough. "We'll take it from here." The twins didn't move. Lila glanced up at her mother, then back at him, confusion written across her face. Nora signed quickly, hand small but firm, "Stay." A murmur rippled through the crowd. Someone gasped softly. Someone else said, "Oh." Vivian's smile twitched. He didn't answer the girls out loud. He signed gently, "I'm here. You're okay. You can choose." That word, choose, shifted something fundamental. The twins straightened a fraction, agency flickering back into their posture. They looked at each other, then stepped slightly closer to him instead of toward their mother. It wasn't defiance, it was instinct. Vivian's breath caught. For the first time, she looked less like a CEO and more like a woman realizing she'd lost a language she should have learned years ago. Around them, guests leaned in, curiosity overriding decorum. This wasn't scandal in the tabloid sense, it was worse. It was human. A man near the bar murmured, "That's not just casual signing." A woman replied, "No, that's fluency, that's training." The word floated, unclaimed but potent. Security shifted again, unsure whose lead to follow. Staff froze mid-task, sensing that something irreversible was happening. The party, meticulously planned down to the minute, had gone off script. Vivienne stepped forward, lowering her voice. "You're overstepping," she said, the edge back now. "You've made your point." "I didn't make one," he replied quietly. "They did." She stared at him, really stared, as if searching for the weakness she could exploit. She found none. What she found instead unsettled her more. Someone who wasn't impressed by her. "Who are you?" she asked again, sharper this time. Before he could answer, a voice from the crowd cut in. "Ro?" A gray-haired man stepped forward, brow furrowed, eyes narrowing in recognition. "Ethan Rowe," he said slowly. "That's you, isn't it?" All eyes swung toward them. He closed his eyes briefly. The past had a way of surfacing when you least wanted it to. The man shook his head in disbelief. "You ran communications for that multinational task force," he continued. "The one everyone studied after. You don't just work events." The lawn buzzed. Phones came back up, and this time without hesitation. Vivienne turned sharply. "Is that true?" He exhaled, long and measured. "I used to," he said. "Not anymore." The admission landed like a dropped glass. Not explosive, shattering. Whispers cascaded, names and half-remembered headlines connecting dots in real time. The contrast was too stark to ignore now. A man she'd ordered back to his place, revealed as someone who once operated far above her circle. Vivienne's expression tightened, pride and anger wrestling with something like shame. She glanced at her daughters, who were still calmer near him than they'd been all night. The power dynamic inverted in plain sight. Before the moment could slip away, let me pause you right here. If you're feeling that slow-burn satisfaction of watching arrogance meet reality, make sure you're subscribed, because what comes next forces a choice no amount of money can dodge. Vivienne straightened, drawing herself up to full height. "This conversation isn't appropriate," she said loudly. "Not here." But it was already here, on the lawn, in the open, with witnesses. And no one was looking away anymore. No one moved when Vivienne declared the conversation inappropriate. The lawn had shifted into something else entirely, a place where social gravity no longer pointed toward the stage but toward the quiet center she didn't control. Guests lingered, hands hovering near glasses they'd forgotten to drink from. Staff slowed, pretending to tidy while listening. She stepped closer to him, lowering her voice again. "You will step away from my daughters," she said. "Now." The twins stiffened instantly. Nora's fingers curled into Lila's sleeve. Lila's eyes darted between faces, searching for safety. He felt the change in their breathing before anyone else noticed. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't touch them. He simply adjusted his stance, placing himself slightly to the side so they weren't boxed in. He signed, steady and deliberate. "You're not in trouble. Look at me." They did. The noise of the party faded for them, narrowed down to his hands and his face. Their shoulders dropped a fraction. Vivienne watched it happen again. The same instant response, the same ease. Her authority hovered uselessly in the air. "This is ridiculous," she snapped, louder now, and the word carried. "You're creating a scene." A woman near the fountain shook her head. "No," she murmured to her companion. "He's stopping one." That comment spread faster than any rumor. Security shifted uncertainly. One guard glanced at Vivienne, then at the twins, then at him. Training collided with instinct. He didn't envy that position. Vivienne turned sharply to the nearest advisor. "Get them inside," she ordered. "We're done here." The advisor hesitated, eyes flicking to the twins who were now shaking their heads, signing quickly to each other. Panic crept back in at the thought of being moved without understanding. He spoke up, calm but firm. "They need to know what's happening before you move them." Vivienne rounded on him. "Do not tell me how to parent." "I'm not," he replied. "I'm telling you what they're telling us." The distinction landed with a dull thud. Guests leaned closer, pretending not to listen while missing nothing. Nora signed urgently. Lila translated with her voice barely above a whisper, the effort visible. "We don't want to go inside like this." A hush fell. Hearing her daughter strain to speak publicly, under pressure, cut deeper than any accusation. Vivienne froze. For a heartbeat, her mask cracked. Then it hardened again. "This is not the place," she said. "We'll discuss this later." Later. The word meant burying it, reshaping it, controlling it. He recognized the tactic instantly. He'd used it himself once, back when outcomes mattered more than people. He wouldn't let it work here. "They won't calm down later," he said quietly. "They need it now." The crowd shifted. Someone near the back started clapping, just once reflexively, then stopped, embarrassed. But the sound lingered, permission waiting to be granted. Vivienne's voice dropped to a hiss. "You are a guest in my home." "No," he corrected gently. "I'm staff." The irony stung her more than defiance would have. She straightened and addressed the crowd again, attempting to reclaim narrative control. "Thank you for your concern," she said, too smoothly. "This has been misinterpreted." But the words slid off. Too many people had seen too much. Her daughters choosing proximity, her commands failing, his calm succeeding. A man stepped forward, emboldened. "With respect," he said, "they look calmer with him." Others nodded. A ripple of agreement moved through the lawn. Vivienne's eyes flashed. "This is my family." "And they're people," someone else replied before thinking better of it. The line had been crossed. Public opinion, once a monolith, fractured. He stayed focused on the twins, signing slowly, explaining what was happening, giving them language for the moment instead of stripping it away. He could feel the old precision returning, the clarity that came when stakes were real. Lila nodded, swallowing hard. Nora's hands slowed. They were still anxious, but grounded. Vivienne watched the transformation with something like disbelief. All her resources, all her planning, and this man, dismissed minutes ago, held the center with nothing but skill and patience. She looked around and realized, too late, that the lawn was no longer hers. "This ends now," she said, but the words lacked force, because it had already ended. The illusion, the hierarchy, the certainty that power always spoke loudest, all of it lay exposed under the lights. And everyone standing there knew it, even if they didn't yet know what to do with that knowledge. He finished the last calming sequence and lowered his hands. The twins stood steady beside him, no longer shrinking. Vivienne took a step back, not much, but enough for everyone to see. Vivienne's step back was small, almost imperceptible, but the lawn felt it. Space opened where certainty had stood, and into that space rushed possibility. Conversations didn't restart this time. They splintered, sharp and alive, people turning to each other with raised brows and half-finished thoughts. The twins stayed where they were. Leela's hands rested loosely at her sides now, no longer clenched. Nora leaned slightly toward him, not clinging, just anchoring. The difference mattered, it always did. Vivienne inhaled slowly, visibly recalibrating. She turned away from the crowd and spoke to her daughters, her voice pitched low and controlled. They watched her hands instead of her face, waiting for signs she didn't quite know how to give. She gestured awkwardly, meaning reassurance, landing closer to command. It didn't work. A quiet sound escaped the crowd, not laughter, not mockery, but recognition, the kind that happens when a truth can't be unseen. He stepped back half a pace, giving the girls room to respond for themselves. He signed gently. "You can tell her what you need." Lila hesitated, then signed slowly, carefully. Nora followed, adding emphasis. They weren't dramatic. They weren't defiant. They were clear. "We want to stay here. We want you to understand." Vivienne's lips parted. She looked at their hands, then at his, then back at theirs again, as if the translation itself was a foreign object she couldn't quite pick up. Around them, the night hummed with waiting. "This is becoming inappropriate," she said, but her voice lacked its earlier edge. It sounded tired now, exposed. A woman near the front murmured, "They've never looked that calm." Another replied. Someone finally spoke to them, not at them. The words reached Vivian whether she wanted them to or not. Her shoulders tightened. Pride battled instinct. Control wrestled with care. An advisor cleared his throat softly. "Vivian," he said, "maybe we should—" She silenced him with a glance. She didn't need help managing optics. She needed help managing reality, and that was harder. Security stepped back another inch, reading the room. Staff resumed small motions, collecting glasses, adjusting chairs. But no one left. This wasn't something you walked away from. This was a moment people would recount later, lowering their voices, saying, "I was there." He felt the weight of it settle in. Public exposure wasn't a spotlight you flipped on, it was a slow reveal, layer by layer, until denial had nowhere to hide. Vivienne finally looked directly at him again. Not past him, not over him, at him. "You could have told me," she said, quieter now. "Privately," he nodded. "I tried." That stung more than accusation, because it was true. He'd intervened softly, respectfully, and she'd shut it down. The memory replayed between them, undeniable. The twins watched their mother carefully, searching for a shift they could trust. Children always knew when adults were posturing. They also knew when something real was about to happen. Vivienne exhaled, the sound shaky despite her effort. "I don't like being corrected in public," she said. "I know," he replied. "But," she continued, and in the word caught, "I don't like this either." She gestured vaguely at the lawn, the eyes, the tension. What she meant was deeper. She didn't like realizing she'd failed at something fundamental while everyone watched. For a moment, it looked like she might retreat fully, call the event, pull her daughters away, end the night by force. That was the version of her everyone expected. Instead, she turned to Lila and Nora again, her hands lifted, stiff and uncertain. She tried to sign. The shapes were wrong, the timing off. But the effort was visible. A ripple went through the crowd, not applause, respect. The twins blinked, startled. Lila signed back slowly, correcting gently. Nora added a small smile, cautious but real. He felt it then, the pivot. Not redemption, not yet, but movement. Vivian swallowed hard. Her voice came out unsteady when she spoke again. I didn't realize how much I was missing." The admission landed softly, but it landed. Cameras lowered. Conversations hushed. The lawn breathed again. He took another step back, intentionally ceding space. This wasn't his family. It had never been. His role was to open the door, not walk through it for them. The twins shifted closer to their mother now, not away from him but toward her, bringing the calm with them. The crowd noticed. That too mattered. Vivian straightened, gathering what composure she could. "We're going to take a short break," she announced. "Thank you for your patience." This time, no one argued. No one needed to. The night had already given them what they came for. As people slowly dispersed into smaller groups, conversations buzzed. No longer about investments or launches, but about what they'd just witnessed. Names were exchanged, stories connected. A reputation was forming, not the kind you could buy. He turned toward the service corridor, instinct pulling him back to where he belonged. As he walked, he felt eyes on his back, not dismissive now, but curious. Measuring. Behind him, Vivian watched him go. Her expression was unreadable, but something had shifted permanently. Power had met a boundary it couldn't cross alone. And both of them knew this wasn't over. It was just moving into its next phase. He reached the edge of the lawn and slipped back into the service corridor, the noise of the party dulling behind him like a door closing on pressure. His pulse finally slowed enough for him to feel it in his chest, a steady thud instead of a warning drum. For a moment, he rested his palms against the cool stone wall and breathed. He hadn't planned to be seen. Public exposure was never about ego for him. It was about timing, about knowing when silence protected people and when it harmed them. Tonight, silence would have broken those girls. A stage manager hurried past, then stopped and doubled back. "You okay?" she asked, softer than before. Respect had crept into her voice. He nodded. "Yeah," she hesitated. "Just don't go anywhere. Vivienne's office is asking for you. Not security, not HR. The office." That alone told him how much the balance had shifted. He straightened his jacket and followed her through the mansion's interior corridor, past abstract art and glass doors that led into restricted spaces. This was the prestige zone now. The place staff rarely entered unless something had gone wrong, or something had changed. As they walked, snippets of conversation echoed from nearby rooms. Advisors murmured about optics. Legal voices floated concerns. Someone mentioned donors already texting questions. The ripple effect was moving faster than Vivian could contain. They stopped outside a sleek door. The stage manager knocked once, then left him there alone. Inside, he could hear movement. Papers sliding. A chair scraping back. "Come in," Vivian called. The office was immaculate, all sharp angles and city views. She stood behind her desk, arms braced on the surface, staring out the window at the lawn below. The twins were no longer visible from here. She didn't turn right away. "You put me in an impossible position," she said quietly. He closed the door behind him. "I know." "That's not an apology," she snapped, spinning around. "It's not meant to be," he replied evenly. "It's acknowledgement." She studied him, searching again for the leverage she usually found so easily. "Do you know what you've cost me tonight?" she asked. He considered the question honestly. "No," he said, "but I know what it would have cost them if nothing changed." Her jaw tightened. For a moment, anger surged back into her eyes. Then it drained, leaving something raw underneath. "You made me look like I don't know my own children," she said. He didn't flinch. "You made yourself look like someone who's still learning them." The words hung between them, dangerous. True. She looked away first. Outside the office, footsteps passed, then paused. Someone laughed nervously. The building felt like it was holding its breath, waiting to see which version of her walked back out. Vivian sank into her chair, suddenly looking less like a titan and more like a woman carrying too many roles at once. "They told me you were recognized," she said, "that you weren't just staff." He nodded. "I used to work in high-pressure environments. Communication failures cost lives." "And now you serve hors d'oeuvres," she said, almost to herself. "And now I raise my son," he replied, "and I take jobs that let me sleep at night." She looked up sharply. "So this was a stunt, a performance?" "No," he said, "it was instinct." Silence settled again, heavier but calmer this time. She folded her hands. "People are asking questions," she admitted, "about you, about me." "That'll pass," he said. "What won't is what your daughters felt tonight." Her eyes flickered, and for the first time, there were tears she didn't immediately blink away. "I thought providing everything else was enough," she said. "The best schools, the best specialists. They don't need better resources," he said gently. "They need access to you." She laughed weakly. "I run a company that prides itself on inclusion." He didn't smile. "Inclusion isn't a policy, it's practice." That landed harder than any accusation could have. A knock interrupted them. An assistant poked her head in. "The guests are restless," she said carefully. "And the twins are asking for you." Vivienne closed her eyes for a beat. Then she opened them, decision made. She stood. "They're asking for both of us," she corrected. He felt a subtle shift then, the strategy moving from exposure to preparation. This was the hinge. What happened next would define the outcome. Before they left the office, let me pause you here. If you're hooked on watching quiet competence reshape power in real time, make sure you're subscribed, because the next moment forces a choice that can't be undone. They stepped back into the corridor together. Not equal, not reconciled, but aligned enough to walk into the next room without pretending nothing had happened. And that, he knew, was where the real test would begin. They walked side by side down the corridor, their footsteps sinking despite themselves. The mansion felt different now, less like a fortress of glass and art, more like a pressure chamber. Voices dipped as they passed. Eyes followed. Word had spread faster than any formal announcement ever could. As they emerged back onto the lawn, the party didn't quite restart. It reorganized around them. Guests formed loose semicircles, pretending to admire the night while clearly waiting for whatever came next. Phones stayed lowered but ready, an unspoken agreement hovering in the air. The twins spotted them immediately. Relief crossed their faces, followed by cautious curiosity when they saw him still beside their mother. Nora signed quickly, her movement smaller now, more controlled. Lila watched their mother's hands closely, gauging intent. Vivienne stopped a few steps away and hesitated. The pause mattered. It signaled uncertainty but also restraint. She knelt, awkwardly, unused to lowering herself in public, and raised her hands. Her signing was still imperfect. Slower, but it was intentional. The crowd collectively leaned in, sensing something fragile unfolding. He stayed standing this time, just to the side, close enough to support, but far enough not to dominate. This was their space now. His role had shifted again, from bridge to guardrail. Vivienne signed carefully, checking her daughters' faces as she went. She explained what had happened, why voices had risen, why people were staring. She admitted she'd been frustrated. The last part came out stiff, like a word she wasn't used to offering. The twins responded honestly. Lila signed with measured clarity. Nora added emphasis where emotion still leaked through. They told her how loud the party felt, how being ignored hurt more than being stared at, how calm arrived when someone took the time to speak their language. The truth moved visibly through Vivienne. Her shoulders lowered. Her mouth tightened, not with anger but regret. Around them, the lawn held still. No one interrupted. No one checked their watch. This wasn't a performance anymore. It was a reckoning. A donor near the back whispered, "This is different." Another replied, "This is real." He watched the exchange with quiet focus, scanning reactions the way he always had. Who leaned forward, who shifted away, who looked uncomfortable seeing power soften. These moments mattered. They shaped what happened next. Vivienne reached out tentatively and touched Lila's arm, asking permission with her eyes first. Lila nodded. The simple gesture sent a ripple through the crowd. Security relaxed further, hands unclenching. Advisors stood back, unsure whether to intervene or witness. For once, no one tried to manage the optics. After a few minutes, Vivienne stood and addressed the guests. Not from the stage, not with a microphone, but from where she was. Her voice carried anyway. "Thank you for your patience tonight," she said. "We're going to change the schedule." Murmurs rose, surprised but receptive. "My daughters and I are stepping away from the main program," she continued. "This event will continue without us for a bit." She paused, then added, "And I want to thank Ethan for reminding me what leadership looks like when no one's taking notes." The acknowledgement landed clean and sharp. No apology tour, no overcorrection. Just recognition, in front of everyone who mattered. Eyes turned toward him. He felt the weight of it press in, not uncomfortable but heavy with consequence. He nodded once, accepting without claiming. The twins looked up at him, searching his face. He signed simply, "You did great." They smiled. Vivienne turned back to them and signed again, slower now, but steadier. "We're going somewhere quieter. Together." They nodded and took her hands. As they moved toward the house, guests parted instinctively, giving them space. Conversations resumed behind them, louder now, energized, the night reshaping itself around what had just occurred. A man approached him hesitantly. "That was impressive," he said. "If you're ever looking for—" He shook his head gently. "I'm not." The man blinked, then laughed softly. "Of course you aren't." Others offered nods, murmured respect. A few asked questions he didn't answer. His reputation was forming without his participation, which was exactly how it should be. As the twins disappeared inside with their mother, he felt a strange mix of relief and vigilance. The public exposure had done its work, but exposure alone didn't guarantee change. Preparation mattered now. What Vivienne did next, after the crowd thinned, after the adrenaline faded, would decide whether this was a turning point or just a spectacle. He turned back toward the service corridor, instinct pulling him away from the spotlight again. That was where he belonged. For now. Behind him, the party surged back to life, louder, looser, charged with something new. Not scandal, not triumph, awareness. And as he walked, he knew the night still had one more test waiting, one that would prove whether power could learn or only react. He didn't make it far down the service corridor before someone called his name. Not sharply, not with authority, with hesitation. He turned and found Vivienne standing alone at the threshold between lawn and hall, the party's glow spilling around her like a frame she hadn't stepped back into yet. The noise behind her had softened, redirected, but not forgotten. "Wait," she said. He stopped. He didn't move closer. For a moment, neither of them spoke. The silence felt different now, not tense, not performative. Private, even with 100 people nearby pretending not to watch. "They're settled," she said finally. "With the caregiver, quiet room, low lights." He nodded. "Good." She studied his face again, but this time without trying to size him up. "You didn't have to stay," she said. "Most people would have left after that." "I wanted to make sure they were okay," he replied. "Then I would have gone." "That's the part I don't understand," she admitted. "You had the room. You had leverage. You could have turned that moment into anything you wanted." He considered the path behind him, the corridor, the exit, the car waiting in the lot. "I already have what I want," he said. "And what's that?" she asked. He didn't answer right away. Somewhere inside the house, laughter rose, then settled. The night kept rearranging itself. "My son," he said simply, "and my peace." The words landed harder than any resume ever could. She exhaled, the sound thin. "I keep thinking if I'd known who you were—" "You would have listened sooner?" he finished gently. She winced. "Yes?" That's the problem, he said. You shouldn't have needed that. Her shoulders sagged, not in defeat but in recognition. I built my life on not needing anyone, she said. Tonight showed me the cost. They stood there, the divide between them no longer measured in status but in choice. People are going to talk, she said. They already are. They always do, he replied. They'll ask why I didn't know how to communicate with my own children, she continued. They'll question my priorities, my leadership. He met her eyes. They should. The honesty didn't sting this time. It clarified. She nodded slowly. I can't undo tonight, she said, but I can decide what it means. That's all anyone ever gets, he said. Another pause, this one longer. I'd like to bring you in, she said then, words careful. Not as staff, as a consultant. Help us redesign how we handle accessibility, internally, publicly. The offer hung there, heavy with opportunity and expectation. He shook his head. I won't work for you. She absorbed that, then surprised him by smiling faintly. I thought you might say that. I will help, he added. If it's about them, or others like them, on my terms. What terms? She asked. No cameras, he said. No press, no branding, and you learn alongside your kids, not above them. She didn't answer immediately. When she did, her voice was steady. Agreed. The decisiveness caught him off guard. Just like that? She looked toward the house where her daughters were. I don't get many chances to fix something this foundational, she said. I won't waste it. For the first time, he believed her. A gust of laughter rose from the lawn, the party fully reclaimed by itself now. Whatever storm had passed left marks, but the structure still stood. Changed. I should get back, he said, gesturing toward the corridor. She nodded. I won't keep you. As he turned to go, she spoke again. Ethan. He stopped. I'm sorry, she said. Not loudly, not publicly, but clearly. He held the moment, then nodded once. Make it count. He walked away before the apology could turn into something else. Performance, guilt, obligation. Some things needed room to breathe. The service corridor welcomed him back with familiar quiet. Staff glanced up, then looked away again, unsure how to recalibrate. He passed through without comment, gathered his jacket, checked the time. Another message from the sitter blinked on his phone. A photo this time. Caleb, asleep on the couch. Homework spread out. A blanket pulled up too high. His chest tightened. He typed back, "Thank you. I'm on my way." As he headed for the exit, a few staff members nodded to him. One whispered, "Good job." Another smiled. No one asked questions. Outside, the night air was cooler, carrying the distant echo of music and something else. Possibility, maybe. He reached his car and paused, looking back once at the mansion glowing against the dark. Inside, a powerful woman was learning a new language. On the lawn, 100 witnesses would carry the story elsewhere. At home, a boy waited who'd never need to know how close his father came to reclaiming a life he'd already chosen to leave. He started the engine. The night didn't follow him, but its consequences would. He pulled out of the driveway slowly, letting the gate close behind him with a muted hum. The mansion lights faded in his rearview mirror, but the night clung to him, dense with unfinished echoes. He drove with the window cracked, cool air cutting through the last of the adrenaline. At a stoplight, his phone buzzed again. Not the sitter this time. Unknown number. He let it ring once, twice, then answered. "Hello." "Mr. Rowe," a woman said, voice measured. "Professional. This is Helena Ortiz. I'm with the Halden Foundation." He almost laughed. Almost. "I won't take a job," he said before she could continue. There was a pause, then a small exhale. "This isn't a job offer," she said. "It's a follow-up. Vivienne asked me to call." He waited. "She's canceled the remainder of the event," Helena continued. "Publicly, cited a family matter. Guests are leaving." That surprised him. Not because it was dramatic, but because it was inconvenient. Canceling an event like that cost money, reputation, control. "Okay," he said. "She also asked me to make sure you got home safely," Helena added, "and to say, thank you, again." He closed his eyes briefly at the red light. "She doesn't owe me anything." "I think she knows that," Helena replied. "Which is why this matters." The light turned green. He drove on. When he hung up, the road felt quieter. The kind of quiet that came after something heavy settled into place. At home, the sitter met him at the door, whispering. "He didn't want to go to bed without you," she said, smiling. "Fell asleep trying." He thanked her, paid her, and watched her leave before locking the door behind him. The apartment was dim, familiar, grounding. He kicked off his shoes and crossed the living room. Caleb lay curled on the couch, one sock missing, pencil still clutched loosely in his hand. Math worksheet half finished. The sight loosened something deep in his chest. He knelt and brushed hair off his son's forehead. "Hey," he whispered. Caleb stirred. "You're home," he mumbled, eyes barely opening. "Yeah," he said, "I'm home." "Did you fix it?" Caleb asked sleepily. He smiled. "I think so." Caleb nodded, satisfied, already drifting again. He carried him to bed, tucked him in, and sat on the edge of the mattress for a moment longer than necessary. Some victories didn't need witnesses. The next morning, the world felt different. Not louder, not brighter, just aware. Messages stacked up while he made coffee. Unknown numbers. Emails forwarded from addresses he didn't recognize. Headlines circulated quietly in private channels. CEO pauses. Event after emotional family moment. A few clips surfaced, shaky but respectful, showing fragments of the lawn scene without context or commentary. He ignored them. By midday, another message came. This one from Vivienne herself. No subject line, no preamble. She wrote about breakfast with her daughters, about learning signs slowly, badly, with laughter instead of frustration, about realizing how often she'd mistaken silence for compliance. She didn't apologize again, she didn't explain herself. She ended with one line, "I'm listening now." He read it twice, then he put the phone down. That afternoon, a delivery arrived. No logo, no card. Inside the box were children's books. Sign language guides, simple, colorful, clearly chosen with care. On top sat a handwritten note, brief and unadorned, for Lila and Nora. "Thank you for giving us a beginning." He exhaled, long and slow. Across the city, Vivienne sat in a quiet room with her daughters, stumbling through signs, letting them correct her, letting herself be wrong without defending it. The board would ask questions. The press would speculate. She would answer some and ignore others. What mattered was smaller now. Closer. Back at his apartment, he finished his coffee and walked Caleb to school. At the gate, his son looked up at him. "You're smiling," he said. "Am I?" he asked. Caleb nodded. "Yeah, like when you fix stuff." He squeezed his son's shoulder. "Sometimes," he said, "fixing things means not fixing them alone." Caleb thought about that, then shrugged. "Okay." As they parted, he felt the last of the night finally release its grip. The public exposure had done what it needed to do. It hadn't crowned him. It hadn't restored a past life. It had corrected a present one. Across town, conversations continued. People told the story in pieces, each version carrying a little less gossip and a little more respect. A staff member who knew sign language. A CEO who listened too late, but listened. Twins who chose connection over comfort. No one called him a hero. That was fine. Heroes stayed. He turned back toward home, phone buzzing once more, not with a demand, not with an offer, but with a photo. Two small hands, clumsy but determined, signing thank you. He smiled, pocketed the phone, and kept walking. Some nights changed lives loudly. This one did it quietly. And that was enough. The weeks that followed didn't come with fanfare. No press conference, no glossy rebrand. Just small, measurable shifts that only people paying attention would notice. At the Halden estate, events resumed with subtle changes. Quiet rooms were added, not hidden. Interpreters stood in plain sight, not off to the side. Staff received training that wasn't framed as charity but competence. Guests adjusted, some awkwardly, some gratefully. The environment learned. Vivian didn't announce any of it. She showed up. She arrived earlier than before, stayed later, and, most notably, spent time where power usually didn't look. Service corridors, prep rooms, spaces built for work, not applause. When she made mistakes, she corrected them publicly, without excuses. It unsettled people at first. Then it recalibrated them. Her daughters changed too. Lila began speaking more, not because she was pushed, but because she was supported. Nora stopped shrinking from crowds, knowing exit paths existed and would be honored. They laughed more. They corrected adults without flinching. They stopped waiting to be overlooked. Across the city, life stayed simple for him. He kept working events, not at the Halden estate exclusively, but wherever the schedule took him. Some nights were quiet, others weren't. Occasionally, someone recognized him, not from headlines, but from that story someone told someone else, lowering their voice saying, "I heard about this guy." He never confirmed it. He never denied it. At home, Caleb asked questions in the way children do, sideways, half-formed, honest. "Why do some people not listen?" he asked one night, legs dangling off the couch. "Because listening means changing," he replied, "and that's harder than talking." Caleb considered this, then nodded, satisfied for now. One afternoon, a package arrived at the apartment. No return address this time. Inside was a small framed photo. Two girls and their mother, hands mid-motion, laughter caught between signs. On the back, a single sentence was written. "We're still learning. Thank you for not giving up on us." He set the frame on a shelf next to Caleb's school photo. It fit there. Quiet. Grounded. The story itself kept traveling, changing shape as stories do. Some versions exaggerated, some simplified. Some missed the point entirely, but the core stayed intact, a moment where power failed and dignity didn't. People debated it online. Was the CEO wrong? Was the staff member out of line? Should things like that happen in public? He never joined the conversation, because the answer wasn't in the argument. It was in the outcome. Months later, at a different event in a different place, he noticed a young staff member kneeling to speak to a child no one else had noticed yet. No one mocked them. No one stopped them. The moment passed without spectacle. That was the real victory. One evening, as he walked Caleb home under flickering streetlights, his son looked up at him again. "Did you ever want to be important?" he asked. He smiled. "I wanted to be useful." Caleb grinned. "You are." At the Halden Company, policies shifted. At the Halden home, habits changed. In rooms across the city, people paid closer attention to who was being left out. None of it traced back to one man kneeling at a party. And all of it did. That's how change actually works. Not loud, not clean, but persistent. And if this story stayed with you, if you felt that slow, satisfying justice of watching arrogance give way to humility, then don't stop here. Subscribe and don't miss our next story. The janitor was fired for touching the piano. Then the orchestra fell silent. Trust me, you'll feel it. And tell me in the comments, what injustice should we tackle next?